It was just an ordinary Sunday when my granddaughter Emily slipped a folded note into my hand under the dining room table. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Grandma, call the police right now. Please don't let them know I told you." My heart skipped a beat. My son, Charles, was pouring wine with a smile that never reached his eyes. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, raised her glass in a toast that sounded rehearsed. I, Margaret, 68 years old, had just received the most terrifying note of my life from my 8-year-old granddaughter. What was happening inside my own home? 3 weeks earlier, it had started with a conversation that forever changed my family. That afternoon, Charles came over with Vanessa, but not with Emily. That alone struck me as odd. They always brought her on Sundays. The serious looks on their faces put me on alert the moment they walked through the door. "Mom, we need to talk," Charles said, avoiding my eyes as he sat down. Vanessa stood tall, as if preparing for battle. "It's about this house, and about your future." George, my husband, was out picking up the newspaper. Clearly, they had planned it so I'd be alone. I sat across from them, the air suddenly heavy. "My future?" I asked, already sensing the worst. "Mom, you're 68. Charles finally met my gaze. "This house is too big for you and Dad. You can't manage it the way you used to." Lies. George and I kept the place spotless. The garden trimmed, the walls freshly painted, every corner gleaming. But I let them continue. "Vanessa and I have been thinking." Charles took her hand. "It would be better if you signed the house over to us now, as an early inheritance. You and Dad could move somewhere smaller, something more comfortable for your age." The audacity of it hit me like a slap. 40 years. George had broken his back in the factory to pay for every brick. 40 years of me rising at 5 a.m. to pack his lunch, saving every penny, denying myself any indulgence so Charles could have good clothes, a proper education, never knowing want. "An early inheritance?" I repeated slowly. "Charles, this house isn't just property. It's our home. It's where we raised your sister, Claudia, where we celebrated your birthdays." "Don't get sentimental." Vanessa cut in with a cold smile. "It's just a house. Honestly, you're both too old to keep it. You should be thinking about us, about Emily, her future." There it was again, the card they always played. As if I didn't think of Emily every second, as if I wasn't the one who bought her school supplies when they were broke, sewed her costumes for school plays, stayed with her when she was sick so they could work. "We're drowning in debt, Mom," Charles admitted, lowering his voice. "Serious debt. If we don't pay soon, we'll lose everything. Emily doesn't deserve that." He wasn't asking for help. He was demanding my home, the house I'd built my life around, using my granddaughter as a bargaining chip. "What debt?" I pressed. Charles looked away, and I felt dread in my bones. "It doesn't matter," Vanessa snapped. "What matters is everything will be fixed if you just give us the house." "No," I said firmly. "This house is not for sale, and I won't hand it over to cover debts you don't even have the courage to tell me about." Vanessa's face hardened, her polite mask slipping. "Margaret, you don't seem to understand how serious this is. We're not asking. We're telling you what's going to happen." "Excuse me?" I shot up, blood pounding in my ears. "Listen, old woman," Vanessa hissed, each word like poison. "You're old. George is old. Any day now you could need round-the-clock care, no longer fit to make your own decisions. Wouldn't it be easier if you just made this transition peacefully now?" Charles said nothing. My own son sat silent while his wife threatened me in my living room. That was when I realized I'd lost him long ago. Vanessa had turned him into a stranger who looked at me as nothing more than an obstacle. "Get out of my house," I said, in a voice even I barely recognized. "Mom," Charles started. "Out!" I shouted, pointing at the door. "And don't come back until you're ready to apologize and tell me the truth about those debts." They left, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. George came home minutes later to find me sobbing on the couch, torn between rage and grief. I told him everything. He sat in silence for a long time, absorbing our son's betrayal. At last he took my hand. "Margaret, I have a feeling this isn't over." He was right. Because 3 weeks later, Charles and Vanessa showed up at my door with Emily in tow, smiling as if they'd never threatened me, never tried to steal my home. And now, holding Emily's trembling note in my hand, I knew George had been right. This wasn't over, it was just beginning. "Are you feeling all right, Mom?" Charles asked across the table, his voice unfamiliar. I folded Emily's note and slipped it into the pocket of my blue dress, forcing myself to stay calm. My granddaughter looked at me with wide, frightened eyes, then dropped her gaze to her plate when Charles turned to her. "I'm fine," I said with a stiff smile. "Just thinking how good Vanessa's cooking is." Vanessa smiled, but it was calculated, unsettling. "Thank you, Margaret. I wanted this lunch to feel special like the old days." The old days, before she threatened me, before she tried to take my house. But I held steady. Something was terribly wrong, and Emily's note was proof. George chewed his chicken slowly, oblivious to the tension. He was always a calm man, maybe too trusting. Maybe he didn't see Charles's nervous glances, Vanessa's controlling gestures, or Emily barely touching her food. "Emily, aren't you hungry?" I asked gently. "Not really, Grandma," she whispered, eyes downcast. "It's fine," Vanessa cut in quickly. "Kids don't always eat, right, Emily?" The child nodded faintly, but I saw her small hands trembling. My pulse raced. What had they done to her? What did she know that I didn't? For the next few minutes, I forced myself to act normal. Charles got up 3 times to fetch pointless things from the kitchen, more water, extra napkins already on the table, a salt shaker no one needed. Each time he exchanged looks with Vanessa. "You know, Mom," Charles said when he sat down the 4th time. "Vanessa and I have been thinking a lot about that conversation we had." Here it was, the plan unfolding. "Oh, really?" I sipped my water. The taste was odd, faintly bitter, but I blamed my nerves. "Yes," Vanessa chimed in, squeezing his hand in a staged gesture. "We realize maybe we were too blunt, too harsh with you." "We want to apologize," Charles added. For a second, I almost believed him. Almost. "We understand this house means a lot to you," Vanessa continued. "We don't want to pressure you into any rash decisions." Lies. The note in my pocket burned like fire. "Thank you both for understanding," I replied carefully. "So," Charles went on, "we thought maybe you could come have lunch with us more often. It would be good for the whole family." "Yes," Vanessa said brightly, her enthusiasm fake. "We could do it every Sunday. Emily would love that, wouldn't you, honey?" Emily gave a weak nod, but when her parents weren't looking, her desperate eyes met mine, twisting my heart. I took another sip. This time, the bitterness was sharp, undeniable. Something was wrong with my drink, very wrong. I set the glass down, pretending to keep eating as dizziness pressed in. "Are you okay, Mom?" Charles asked, not with concern, but with expectation. "A little tired," I admitted, which wasn't a lie. My body felt heavy, my head clouded. "Maybe you should lie down for a bit," Vanessa offered quickly. "After lunch?" "Of course." "Yes," Charles added smoothly. You've been working too much in the garden. Too much for my age? I finished the sentence. My tone made them wary. No, I didn't mean that, Charles backpedaled. But I knew. The bitter water, the staged lunches, Emily's desperate note. They were drugging me. Right here, in my own home, in front of George, in front of my granddaughter. They were poisoning me slowly. Excuse me, I said, rising carefully. I need the bathroom. Inside, I pulled Emily's note from my pocket and read it again. Call the police now. But what would I say? That my son and daughter-in-law were slipping drugs into my drink? Where was the proof? Would anyone believe me? I stared at my reflection. My pupils were dilated, unnatural. There was no doubt something was in that water, but I had to be smart. If I confronted them without evidence, they'd deny it, and if they really were drugging me, what would they do next? I walked back to the table, steadying my steps, though my legs felt like jelly. You okay, Grandma? Emily whispered, her eyes full of fear that told me everything. I'm fine, sweetheart, I murmured, giving her a wink, hoping she understood that I had gotten her message. George kept eating, oblivious. He drank from his own glass without issue, which meant only mine was tainted. Charles and Vanessa exchanged another glance, thinking I hadn't noticed. Mom, Charles said suddenly, you've been forgetting a lot lately, haven't you? The question hit me like ice water. What are you talking about? The other day on the phone, Vanessa chimed in. You seemed confused, like you couldn't remember what you'd just said. Lies. I remembered every cruel word, but now I understood their game. George mentioned you sometimes wake up at night and don't remember why, Charles added. More lies. George had never said that because it never happened. My husband looked at them in surprise, clearly baffled. I don't recall saying that, George muttered. Oh, it's normal, Vanessa rushed to explain. Older folks don't always notice little changes. It creeps up slowly. They were crafting a story, painting me as senile, and I realized this had been planned for weeks. Maybe you should see a doctor, Charles suggested, feigning concern. A geriatric specialist, Vanessa added smoothly. We know a really good one, someone who understands sensitive cases. A doctor they'd likely bought off, or at least one willing to declare dementia based on their word alone. Everything was clear now. Are you listening, Mom? Charles pressed. Yes, I answered, letting my voice falter just slightly. Sorry, I was thinking. You mentioned a doctor? Vanessa smiled with satisfaction. Charles looked relieved. They thought their plan was working. But I knew the truth. They were drugging me to make me look confused. They'd document every strange behavior at these family lunches. Find witnesses to confirm my supposed decline. Then, with a crooked doctor's help, they'd declare me incompetent. They'd take the house. And I'd end up locked in a nursing home, drugged into silence, while they enjoyed the fruits of George's and my 40 years of sacrifice. But they had one problem. Emily, my brave little granddaughter, had uncovered their plan and risked everything to warn me. Now I had to be smarter than them. The rest of that lunch turned into a stage play. I pretended to grow more and more confused. I deliberately dropped my fork a few times, asked the same question twice. Each time I acted disoriented. Charles and Vanessa exchanged satisfied glances. George, my poor husband, began to look genuinely worried. Margaret, are you sure you're okay? He asked, placing a hand on my forehead. You look a little pale. I'm fine, sweetheart, I replied, letting my voice tremble. Just a little tired. You see, Dad? Charles said with the smug tone he had clearly rehearsed for weeks. That's why we're worried. Mom just hasn't been herself. Vanessa gave me a look of false concern. George, I've noticed it too. On our recent visits, Margaret seemed distracted, like she couldn't remember what she'd just said. My husband gazed at me with genuine love and worry. I hated lying to him, hated making him believe something was wrong with me, but I needed time to uncover the full scope of Charles and Vanessa's plan. Maybe we should call Dr. Harper, George suggested. He's been our family doctor for 20 years. No, Vanessa cut in quickly. Dr. Harper is too old-fashioned. With specialized issues like this, you need someone more up-to-date. A specialist. We know Dr. Victor Mason, Charles added smoothly. He's the best geriatric doctor in the city. Very professional, very understanding. That was their man. The doctor they'd bribed. The one who would declare me demented in exchange for money or favors. Can we schedule an appointment for next week? Vanessa pressed. Just so Dr. Mason can examine Margaret and put everyone at ease. Emily stayed quiet through all of this, but I could feel her eyes on me from across the table. While her parents talked with George about doctors and symptoms, she locked her gaze with mine and mouthed one word. Careful. My heart filled with pride and fear at the same time. This 8-year-old child was risking herself to protect me. I had to live up to her courage. I think that's a good idea, I said finally, shocking them all. If you think I should see a doctor, I trust your judgment. A victorious smile spread across Vanessa's face. Charles relaxed completely, convinced their plan was working perfectly. Wonderful, Mom, Charles said, taking my hand with fake tenderness that made my stomach churn. We'll book the appointment first thing tomorrow. After lunch, they insisted I rest while they cleared the table. George went to his study to read the newspaper, and I pretended to go to my room but lingered in the hallway. You think she took the bait? Vanessa whispered. Completely, Charles replied in a low voice. Did you see her at lunch? Confused, disoriented, perfect. And George is no problem. He loves her too much. He'll go along with whatever he thinks is best for her. Once Dr. Mason confirms the diagnosis, George will sign anything we put in front of him. You're sure Mason will cooperate for $50,000 and the promise of being the family's private doctor once we control her estate. Mason will sign whatever we need. My blood ran cold. They weren't just drugging and manipulating me, they were bribing a doctor to falsify a diagnosis. This was worse than I had imagined. And what about Emily? Vanessa asked. She was awfully quiet today. She's just a kid, Charles dismissed. She doesn't understand what's going on. And even if she did, who would believe her? I wanted to burst out and scream that my granddaughter understood everything, that she was smarter and braver than the two of them combined. But I held back. I needed more. How long do you think it will take? Vanessa asked. A month, maybe 2 at most. First comes the diagnosis, then a short observation period to record her decline. After that, the official declaration of incompetence. Once we have guardianship, we can sell the house and pay off the debts. And if George resists? George is old and tired. Once he believes she needs specialized care, it'll be easy to convince him that a nursing home is best, especially once she starts having outbursts. Outbursts? Vanessa sounded curious. A higher dose of sedatives will make her act strangely angry, even dangerous. George will be terrified and beg us to commit her. I bit my lip so hard it nearly bled to stop myself from screaming. They planned to drug me until I became a shadow of myself, then use that behavior as justification to lock me away, all to steal my home and pay off debts, no doubt from gambling or foolish investments. It's the perfect plan, Vanessa whispered. We'll have the house, pay off the debts, and start fresh. Emily will have a better life without the burden of some senile old woman. A senile old woman. That's how they saw me. After all the sacrifices I made for Charles, all the years of hard work to give him a good life, I was nothing more than a stumbling block to their happiness. When I heard them move into another room, I slipped quietly back into mine. I sat on the bed, trembling not from the drugs, but from rage and fear. What was I going to do? If I confronted them now, they'd deny everything. If I called the police, what could I say? That my son was drugging me based on the bitter taste of water and a note from an 8-year-old child? I needed proof. Solid proof. And I had to protect Emily, who had risked herself to save me. I heard footsteps in the hall. Someone was approaching my room. I quickly lay down and closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. "She's out," Vanessa whispered. "Looks like it," Charles said. "The sedatives are working perfectly." Within the hour, they believed I would remember none of what happened today. "You brought the camera?" Vanessa asked softly. "The camera? Right here," Charles muttered, holding up his phone. "Start recording when I ask questions. We need evidence of her confusion to show Dr. Mason." I cracked one eye just enough to see Charles holding the phone, filming, while Vanessa stood nearby. "Mom," Charles said loudly, feigning surprise. "You're awake?" I opened my eyes, slowly, as if I had just stirred from sleep. "Charles, what time is it?" "4 in the afternoon, Mom. We just had lunch. Don't you remember?" I pretended to squint in confusion. "Lunch already?" Charles glanced triumphantly at Vanessa. The phone kept rolling. "An hour ago, Mom. Vanessa cooked chicken. Emily was right here. Don't you remember?" "Emily?" I repeated slowly. "My granddaughter was here?" "Yes, Mom. She ate with us. We even talked about taking you to the doctor. Don't you recall?" I shook my head, feigning total disorientation. "No, I don't remember. Why do I need a doctor?" "Because you keep forgetting things, like right now. You've been so confused lately. Real tears spilled from my eyes, not just acting, but from the real pain of betrayal." "I don't understand," I whispered. "What's wrong with me?" "Don't worry, Mom," Charles said with false tenderness, so convincing that for a fleeting second I almost forgot it was all a cruel performance. "We'll take care of you. The doctor will help us figure out what's happening." Vanessa nodded solemnly behind the camera, recording the perfect staged proof of my supposed decline. "Get some more rest, Mom," Charles urged. "You'll feel better when you wake up." They slipped out, closing the door softly. I heard them whispering in the hallway about how good the footage was, how impressed Dr. Mason would be. I lay still, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would tear through my chest. I had proof now, but I had to be more cautious than ever. One wrong move, and I'd end up exactly where they wanted me, drugged, silenced, locked away while they enjoyed the fruits of George's and my lifetime of sacrifice. That night, after Charles and Vanessa left with Emily, I waited until George was sound asleep before I acted. He snored gently beside me, blissfully unaware of the danger hanging over us. I slipped out of bed like a shadow. The first thing I did was check the glass of water I'd been drinking at lunch. I had secretly kept it in the kitchen cabinet while pretending to help clean up. Under the pale moonlight through the window, I tilted the glass and saw it, a faint white residue clinging to the bottom, like powder that hadn't dissolved. I grabbed a small plastic bag and carefully scraped it inside. Not much, but maybe enough for a lab to test. I hid it at the bottom of my jewelry box, beneath the pearls my mother had left me. Then I went into the study and pulled out my old phone, the one George always nagged me to replace. I'd never been more grateful for keeping it. I searched for Dr. Victor Mason, and what I found chilled me. In the last 5 years, the state medical board had disciplined him 3 times, once for falsifying billing, once for misdiagnosing a condition, and once for prescribing medication without justification. Exactly the kind of crooked doctor Charles and Vanessa needed. But then I found something worse. A news article from 2 years ago about a civil lawsuit. Mason had been accused of falsely diagnosing dementia in an elderly man so the man's son could take control of his estate. The case was dismissed for lack of evidence, but the details were haunting. It was exactly what they were planning to do to me. I screenshotted everything and saved it in a new folder on my phone. Then I researched recording laws. I discovered that in my state, it was legal to record a conversation as long as one party, the person doing the recording, was present. That meant if I could capture Charles and Vanessa admitting to their plan, it would be admissible in court. I also found labs that tested suspicious substances without a doctor's order. 2 were in the city, 1 promising results within 48 hours and total confidentiality. The next step was riskier. I would need to get access to Charles's phone to copy the footage he had just taken of me pretending to be confused. I remembered he always charged his phone in the kitchen using the charger George and I had given him. That would have to wait until the next time. For now, I focused on documenting everything. I typed a detailed letter describing it all: the first conversation about the house, the threats, today's lunch, the drugs in my water, the conversation I overheard, and the staged video they made. I printed it, signed it, and locked it in our safe with our important papers. I wrote another letter addressed to my lawyer, Daniel Brooks, outlining everything and asking him to review my will and power of attorney. If anything happened to me, I wanted to make sure George was protected and that Charles couldn't manipulate him. As I wrote, my head swam with plans and fear. I had to tread carefully. If Charles and Vanessa suspected I knew, they might accelerate their scheme, or worse, turn violent. Emily had already risked too much by warning me. I couldn't let her be in more danger. By 3 a.m., I finally slipped back into bed. George stirred as I lay down but didn't wake. I watched him sleep, my heart aching with love and sorrow. My poor husband had no idea that our only son had chosen to betray us in the cruelest way imaginable. On Monday morning, Charles called early, just as he had promised. "Mom, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mason for Wednesday at 2 p.m. Can you make it?" "Yes, son," I answered, keeping my voice calm. "If you think it's necessary." "It is, Mom. After what happened yesterday, Dad and I are really worried about you." Lies. George was worried, yes, but Charles was only calculating how much he could squeeze from this house. "George will go with me, won't he?" I asked. "Of course, Mom. We want Dad to feel comfortable with the doctor, too. After all, if you need special care, he'll be part of the decision." Special care. A polite way to say nursing home. "I understand, son. I'll see you Wednesday." "Mom, are you feeling okay today? No more episodes of confusion?" Episodes of confusion. They even had their medical vocabulary rehearsed. "I feel fine, Charles. Just a little tired." "Good. Get some rest and don't go out alone. In case." "In case of what?" "In case you get disoriented or lose your way. Just as a precaution." They were isolating me, restricting my freedom, building their story of an old woman who couldn't manage herself. After hanging up, I told George I had errands downtown. He was so shaken by the previous day's conversation that he insisted on coming along. "George, sweetheart, I need to go alone. Woman's business." "What kind of business?" "A gynecologist appointment." I lied without blinking. Just a routine checkup. George blushed and nodded. After 45 years of marriage, he still got embarrassed at the mention of such things. My first stop was the independent forensic lab. A young receptionist with red glasses greeted me professionally. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" I handed her the small plastic bag with the residue. "I need this tested. I believe someone put something in my drink." She didn't look surprised. Maybe she'd seen cases like this before. "Do you have any idea what it might be?" "Something that causes confusion, sleepiness, memory loss, maybe a sedative. A full analysis will cost $2,000, with results in 48 hours. "Do you need an official report for legal purposes?" "Yes, please." I filled out the forms with my real name, Margaret Harris, widow, Boston. I paid in cash and kept the receipt. In 48 hours, I would have scientific proof that they were drugging me. My second stop was the office of Daniel Brooks, my lawyer. He'd known me for 20 years, handled our home purchase, our wills, and a few other family matters. "Margaret, what a surprise. How are you and George these days?" "Daniel, I need your help with something very serious." I told him everything. Daniel listened without interrupting, but I could see his face hardening as each detail fell into place. "Margaret, what you've just described amounts to several crimes: fraud, drugging without consent, conspiracy to falsify legal documents. What can I do to protect myself?" "First, we'll review your will and power of attorney. We'll make sure only George can make medical decisions for you, and only in the event of genuine incapacity verified by independent doctors. And if they try to declare me incompetent anyway, with the evidence you're gathering, it will be impossible. But we need more. Can you record their admissions?" "I'm working on it." Daniel handed me a small recorder, no bigger than a lipstick tube, capable of 8 hours of continuous recording. "The sound quality is excellent, and you're fully within your rights to record conversations you're part of." He also gave me the number of a private investigator. Her name is Noelle Carter. "If you need extra help collecting evidence, she's the best. Discreet and professional." I left his office feeling steadier, but also more anxious. Wednesday's appointment with Dr. Mason would be the most dangerous moment yet. I had to act confused enough not to raise suspicion, but not so much that the fake diagnosis would sound credible. That night, George and I ate dinner in silence. He kept watching me, clearly troubled by Charles's talk of my supposed confusion. "Margaret," he said at last, "do you really not remember Sunday's lunch?" My heart broke. George was beginning to doubt me, swayed by our son's lies. "George, my love," I said, taking his hand, "in 45 years of marriage, have I ever lied to you? Never." "Then trust me when I tell you something is very wrong here. Charles and Vanessa are not telling the truth." George studied my face for a long time, then nodded. "I believe you, Margaret. I've always believed you." It was all I needed to hear. No matter what happened on Wednesday, George would stand beside me. Wednesday arrived like a storm we knew was coming. Charles and Vanessa showed up at 1:30 sharp, all fake smiles and carefully chosen outfits, ready to impress the greedy doctor. "Ready, Mom?" Charles offered his arm as if I were some frail old woman who needed help walking. "Ready," I answered, making sure Daniel's recorder was well hidden in my purse. George went with us, silent but alert. My husband had a good sense for things. He knew this appointment wasn't what it seemed. Dr. Mason's office was on the 14th floor of a medical tower downtown. The waiting room was plush, with cream leather chairs and fashion magazines, designed to project success and trustworthiness. "Mrs. Margaret Harris," Charles announced to the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with neatly combed hair and a professional smile. "Dr. Mason is expecting you." We were ushered into a spacious office, one wall covered in framed diplomas. Dr. Mason was about 50, with slicked-back gray hair and a smile that never touched his eyes. Exactly the type I expected someone willing to twist a diagnosis for money. "Pleasure to meet you," he said, shaking my hand far too long. "Your son has shared his concerns." "Doctor." Charles jumped in immediately. As I explained on the phone, my mother has been having episodes of confusion, memory loss, and disorientation. "I see," Mason said, jotting notes. "How often?" "More and more frequently," Vanessa lied smoothly. "Just this past Sunday, she didn't remember we'd had lunch together an hour later." George shifted uncomfortably. "Doctor, I live with Margaret every day and I haven't noticed anything." "That's common," Mason cut him off quickly. "Family members who are with the patient daily often miss gradual changes. It's usually visitors who notice. Do you have any recordings?" He turned to Charles. "As it happens, yes," Charles said, pulling out his phone. "I recorded her on Sunday when she seemed completely disoriented. My heart raced. This was the moment." He played the video of me pretending to be confused. On screen, I looked lost, asking where I was and whether Emily had been there. My acting looked convincing, dangerously convincing. "As you can see," Charles explained, "she didn't remember lunch just an hour after we'd eaten." "Very concerning," Mason murmured, scribbling. "Mrs. Harris, do you remember this recording being made?" A trap. If I said yes, I contradicted the video. If I said no, I confirmed their diagnosis. "Not clearly," I answered carefully. "I just remember being tired that day." "Do you remember the lunch your son mentioned?" "Vaguely, like through a fog." Mason nodded, satisfied. "We'll run a few simple cognitive tests." For the next 20 minutes, Mason asked me questions designed to test memory. I answered most correctly, but deliberately stumbled on some names, dates, the kind of mistakes early dementia patients might make. "What day is it?" "Wednesday." "What's today's date?" I hesitated. "March 15th. 18th, he corrected. "What year are we in?" 2024. "What did you have for breakfast today?" I pretended to struggle. "Coffee and toast." "I'm not sure." George watched me, truly worried. I hated deceiving him, but it had to look real. After the tests, Mason asked to speak privately with Charles and Vanessa. George and I waited in the next room. "Margaret," George whispered, squeezing my hand, "do you really not remember breakfast?" "You had oatmeal with strawberries." "George, trust me," I whispered back. "It'll be fine." Through the cracked door, I caught snippets. Symptoms consistent with early dementia, progressive cognitive decline, recommend capacity evaluation. Specialized care may be required. 10 minutes later, we were called back in. Mason wore the grave expression of a man rehearsing his lines. "Mrs. Harris, based on my observations and today's tests, I have concerns about your cognitive function." "What kind of concerns?" George asked. "Your symptoms are consistent with the early stages of dementia: short-term memory loss, disorientation, difficulty recalling recent events." "Are you sure?" George's voice broke. "Further testing is needed to confirm, but I strongly recommend the family start considering specialized care options." "What kind of options?" Charles asked, feigning surprise. "There are excellent senior care centers designed for dementia patients, where she can receive continuous medical attention." "Doctor," I interjected. "Aren't there any medications that might help?" "At an advanced stage like yours, medications have limited effect. The priority is safety for both you and your husband." Advanced stage. According to this fraud, after a 30-minute consultation and a staged video, I was now suffering from severe dementia. "How fast does it usually progress?" Vanessa asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. "In cases like this, it can advance quickly, sometimes just weeks or months. The important thing is to act early," Mason said. "I understand," Charles nodded. "Can you recommend a specific center?" "There are several I often work with. I'll give you a list." "And legally?" Vanessa cut in. "What kind of paperwork do we need to protect her interests?" Exactly the question they had come here to ask. In confirmed dementia cases, it's usually best to establish legal power of attorney so family members can manage the patient's finances and medical care, Mason answered. "Can you prepare the medical documentation?" Charles asked bluntly. "Of course. I can draft a detailed report on Mrs. Harris's mental condition. That was exactly what they wanted, a fake diagnosis, giving them control of my assets and the authority to place me in a nursing home. "Doctor," George finally spoke, "I want a second opinion." Mason tensed slightly. "That's your right, but I must warn you, every day without proper treatment is a day lost." "Who would you recommend?" George pressed. Mason named 2 other doctors, no doubt allies or at least willing to rubber stamp his diagnosis without question. We left the clinic with an appointment for the following week and a list of recommended care centers from Mason. In the elevator, Charles and Vanessa exchanged triumphant glances. They thought everything was going according to plan, not realizing that in my purse, Daniel's recorder had captured every word, Mason's hints about legal documents, the transactional tone. I had proof of this corrupt doctor. Now I just needed the lab results to complete my file. Justice was getting closer. That afternoon, while George dozed in his chair, struggling to process the false diagnosis, I received a call that changed everything. "Mrs. Harris, this is the Independent Forensic Lab. We have your results." My heart pounded. "What did you find?" The sample contained lorazepam at a significant level. It's a sedative. At this dosage, it can cause confusion, temporary memory loss, and drowsiness. Lorazepam. They had been slipping me psychiatric drugs that matched perfectly with the symptoms they were documenting. "Is it dangerous?" I asked. "Not lethal at the level detected, but it definitely alters behavior and cognition. Do you need a formal report?" "Yes, as detailed as possible. You can pick it up tomorrow morning after 10. I hung up, my hand trembling not from fear this time, but from exhilaration. I had scientific evidence proving they had been drugging me. On Thursday morning, Charles called early again. "Mom, how are you feeling after yesterday's appointment?" "A little foggy," I admitted, and it wasn't entirely a lie. "The doctor said some troubling things." "I know, Mom. It's hard to accept. But Vanessa and I looked at the centers Mason recommended. There's a very good one near our house." "Of course. Convenient for them. Easy to keep drugging me." "Can you come to lunch again this Sunday?" Charles asked. "We want to talk more with you and Dad. Will Emily be there?" "Of course, you know she loves being with you." Poor child, forced to witness them poison her grandmother. But this time, I was prepared. "Yes, son. See you Sunday." After hanging up, I went straight to the lab for the report. The technician handed me a sealed envelope. "Mrs. Harris," she said softly, "I shouldn't advise, but if someone is drugging you without consent, you should alert the authorities." "I'm handling it," I replied. My next stop was Daniel Brooks's office. My lawyer read the report, his face darkening. Margaret, this is conclusive proof of attempted poisoning. Combined with the clinic recording, you now have a very strong case. What do I do next? We need evidence of collusion. If you can capture Charles and Vanessa admitting to drugging you, we'll have enough for criminal charges. They'll be here Sunday, and they may try again. Daniel leaned forward. Margaret, what I'm about to suggest is risky, but it could give us the decisive evidence. He laid out the plan. Dangerous, yes, but the only way to catch Charles and Vanessa in the act. Sunday came, gray and cold. At exactly noon, Charles, Vanessa, and Emily arrived, repeating their old routine. But this time, I had 3 recorders hidden, one in my purse, one taped under the dining table, and one in the kitchen. "How are you today, Mom?" Charles asked as Vanessa busied herself in the kitchen. "Better," I replied clearly. I saw him glance nervously at Vanessa. A day of clarity wasn't part of their script. Emily came close and whispered in my ear, "Grandma, did you get my note?" "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered back. "Everything will be fine." During lunch, I watched every move. Vanessa poured water from a separate pitcher, filling only my glass. The others drank from a different one. "Mom," Charles began as we ate, "Vanessa and I have been thinking about Dr. Mason's advice." "Yes, we really believe you should seriously consider moving somewhere with full-time care," Vanessa added. I sipped the water, the bitter taste spreading instantly. "You mean a nursing home?" "Don't call it that, Mom. It's a specialized care center, a beautiful place where you'll have friends your age and constant medical attention." "And George?" I asked. "Dad can visit any time. So can we. Emily will see you even more." Lie after lie, delivered with false tenderness. "When would I need to move?" I asked, pretending to weigh it. "Soon," Vanessa answered. "Dr. Mason said your condition could worsen quickly. And the house? That was what they wanted." "We'd have to sell it to cover the costs, Mom. It's very expensive," Charles said, feigning reluctance. "Sell the house?" George looked stunned. "Charles, this is our home. Dad, be realistic. Mom will need lifelong care. Good centers cost between $15,000 and $20,000 a month." The number was inflated, but it sounded convincing enough. "Besides," Vanessa added, "this house is far too big for just you. You could move into a smaller apartment and still have money left over for Mom's care." Everything was calculated. They planned to separate us, sell the house, and pocket most of the money after paying for a cheap facility. "I don't know," George murmured. "This is happening so fast." "Dad," Charles pressed, his voice hardening, "we can't wait. What if Mom has a severe episode? What if she hurts herself or wanders off?" Emily had been quiet, but I saw tears in her eyes. My brave granddaughter knew exactly what her parents were doing. "Maybe we should consult a lawyer," George said. "A lawyer?" Charles stiffened. "For what? We just want to help Mom." "Lawyers complicate everything," Vanessa said sweetly. "Mom isn't competent to make legal decisions anymore," Charles added. Dr. Mason was very clear about that. I knew it was time. "Charles," I said, letting my voice falter, "why can't I remember things? Why do I always feel so strange after lunch?" He and Vanessa exchanged a look, too obvious to miss. "That's your illness, Mom," Charles answered carefully. "But I feel fine on other days. Only after eating with you do I feel this way." Vanessa hesitated. "Margaret, that's normal. Social interaction can be tiring. It's part of the illness. But why only here? Why not at home with George?" "You're confused again," Charles cut in, his tone sharp. It was time to risk everything. Is there something in the food? In the water? I asked directly. The silence that followed was suffocating. Charles and Vanessa froze, stunned that I dared ask outright. George sat straighter, his voice slow. "Margaret, what are you suggesting?" "I think someone has been drugging me." The reaction was immediate. Charles jumped up, his face flushed with anger. "Mom, how can you say that? We're your family." "She's delusional," Vanessa snapped, but her voice shook. Emily's wide eyes filled with fear. "George," I went on, "my water tastes bitter, just like last week. Only my glass. No one else drank from that pitcher." George looked at the two pitchers on the table, realizing for the first time they were different. "Charles," he said slowly, "why are there two separate no-death pitchers?" The trap had sprung. Now I just had to wait for them to slip. The room was thick with tension. "Dad," Charles finally said, trying for calm but trembling. "Mom's having another paranoid episode. Dr. Mason warned us this could happen." "Paranoid?" I repeated, feigning confusion but holding my ground. "George, drink from this glass." He reached for it, but Vanessa snatched it away. "No, George," she said with a forced smile. "Margaret already drank from that. If she has an infection, you could catch it." Too smooth, too fast. Exactly the tell I needed. "Since when do you care about my health, Vanessa?" I shot back. For a moment the mask slipped, revealing the coldness beneath. "I've always cared about this family, Margaret. Is that why you want to lock me away and sell my home?" "Mom!" Charles shouted, losing control. "Enough! You're sick. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." I stood, my voice cutting like glass. "I know you've been drugging me for weeks. I know you plan to declare me incompetent, and I know Dr. Mason is a fraud you've bribed to sign a false diagnosis." George stared at me, stunned, but I saw the light dawning in his eyes. He was putting the pieces together. "Margaret," he asked slowly, "are you certain?" "Absolutely." Charles turned to him desperately. "Dad, can't you see? Mom's delusional." "Doctor, Mason said this is classic late-stage dementia." But Emily, my brave little granddaughter, chose that moment to speak. "Grandma isn't delusional," she said softly but firmly. I heard it. The room went still. Charles and Vanessa went pale. "What did you hear, sweetheart?" I asked gently. "Last week, in the kitchen," Emily whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "Mom told Dad it was time to give Grandma more medicine so she'd get more confused." The silence was crushing. Charles and Vanessa stared at their daughter in horror, not because they were exposed, but because she had betrayed them. "You misunderstood, honey," Vanessa stammered. "You don't know what you heard." "I do," Emily said, stronger now. "You said the doctor would give you papers to take Grandma's house. You said she'd be better off somewhere she wouldn't bother you anymore." George rose to his feet, his face shifting from confusion to rage. "Charles, what the hell is going on here? Dad, Emily's just a child. She doesn't understand." "Enough!" George roared. I had never seen him so furious. "You drugged your own mother." Charles opened his mouth, but no words came. Vanessa tried to recover control. "George, Margaret is very sick. Sometimes she needs sedatives for her own good." "What kind of drugs?" George barked. "Just something mild, to calm her down." "No prescription," I cut in. "No consent from me. No notice to George. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" Vanessa shrieked, losing her composure. "Because you two are too stubborn to admit Margaret needs help, we had no choice." "It was the only way," Charles shouted too. Mom would never agree to leave this house willingly. There it was, the confession I needed. "So you admit you drugged your own mother," I said slowly. Charles realized too late. "I didn't mean it like that. You meant exactly what you said. You poisoned me to make me look confused. You bribed a corrupt doctor for a false diagnosis. All of it just to take my house." "It's not stealing," Vanessa screamed. It's our inheritance. We would get it anyway." "After I die," I replied coldly. "But you didn't want to wait that long." George stepped toward Charles, and for a moment I thought he would strike his son. "Get out of my house," he thundered in a voice I had never heard before. "Get out now and never come back. Dad, you—" "Don't understand. Out!" George shouted. "Before I call the police." "Police?" Vanessa forced a laugh. "We haven't broken any laws." I pulled out my phone, opened the recorder, and spoke calmly. Non-consensual poisoning, medical fraud, conspiracy to seize assets, elder abuse. Every word recorded. Your own confessions. Charles and Vanessa's faces twisted as they understood the weight of their crimes. I also have a lab report confirming lorazepam in my drink and the recording from Dr. Mason's office where you discussed legal paperwork to steal my property. Charles collapsed into a chair, defeated. "Mom, you just wanted to rob me," I cut in. "And you were willing to destroy my mind to do it." Vanessa still tried one last defense. "Margaret, if you report this, what about Emily? Do you want her to grow up without peace?" Her final plea, hiding behind her daughter, but Emily stepped forward and took my hand. "Grandma," she said firmly, "do whatever you need to do. I love you, but what they did was wrong." In that moment, I knew I had raised Emily right despite her parents. "George," I said calmly, "call the police." "Wait," Charles cried, leaping up. "We can fix this. We'll leave, never come back, just forget it all." "And how are you planning to make me forget?" I asked icily. "Keep drugging me until I can't remember my own name?" "Mom, please. I am no longer your mother. My son died the day he chose to poison me." George had already dialed emergency services. Charles and Vanessa looked at each other in despair, realizing there was no escape. "Emergency! What's your situation?" The dispatcher's voice rang out. "I need to report a case of poisoning and fraud targeting an elderly woman," George said clearly. That was the moment I had been waiting for. Justice was finally at the door, but I knew this was only the beginning. The harder part would be rebuilding life after losing my son and ensuring Emily was safe far from parents who would do anything for money. The police arrived in 15 minutes, though it felt like an hour. In that time, Charles and Vanessa alternated between begging and threatening. Emily never left my side, gripping my hand like an anchor in the storm. "Grandma," she whispered, "are they going to take my parents away?" "Maybe, sweetheart," I answered honestly. What they did was very serious. "Then where will I go?" The question cut me deep. "I don't know yet, but I promise you'll be safe and have everything you need." The officers handled everything with care and professionalism. Lieutenant Patrick Hayes, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, took my statement while his partner, Officer Kelly Martin, interviewed George separately. "Mrs. Margaret," Hayes said, "I understand you have evidence showing they've been drugging you for some time." I handed over everything: the lab results, the recordings, the photos of Dr. Mason, and Emily's testimony. He reviewed each document carefully, then nodded. "Very thorough. Did you work with a lawyer to prepare all this?" "Yes, with Mr. Daniel Brooks. He guided me on what to gather." "Wise," Hayes said. Most elder abuse victims aren't in a condition to document things this clearly. Meanwhile, I could hear Charles and Vanessa raising their voices in the living room with Officer Martin, insisting I was just delusional. "You will question Dr. Mason, won't you?" I asked. "Absolutely. If what you've said is true, he'll face charges of medical fraud and conspiracy." An hour later, a child services worker arrived to interview Emily. My granddaughter repeated her account with clarity and courage that brought tears to my eyes. When the interviews were over, Lieutenant Hayes stepped into the room where we waited. "Charles Harris and Vanessa Harris," he declared. "You are under arrest for poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse." The cold snap of handcuffs filled the air as they closed around Charles's wrists. Vanessa sobbed, but not from remorse, only self-pity. "Ridiculous," Charles shouted as they led him out. "My mother's sick. This is all her imagination." "Save your breath for court," I replied evenly. That was the last thing I said to him as my son. After they were taken away, the child services worker sat down with George, Emily, and me to discuss her situation. "In cases like this," she explained, "children are usually placed in temporary foster care until long-term custody is resolved." Her name was Rosa Johnson, young but firm in tone. "Could she stay with us?" George asked immediately. "It's possible, but I need to fully evaluate the home environment and your ability to provide care, given your age and the recent trauma." I stepped in. "We are more than capable of caring for Emily. She's been through enough. Taking her away from us now would only hurt her more." "The child's long-term welfare comes first," Rosa explained. "Raising an 8-year-old at your age is not simple." I looked her straight in the eye. "My granddaughter saved my life, risking her own to do the right thing. She is braver than most adults I've met. I will not let the system punish her for her courage." Emily squeezed my hand. "I want to stay with Grandma and Grandpa." Rosa's voice softened. "What you want matters, but I must ensure you're in the safest place possible." George finally spoke. "Miss Johnson, I respect your job. Let us keep her for now while you complete your evaluation." Rosa considered, then nodded. "I can arrange temporary custody for 30 days. I'll visit weekly, and Emily will need ongoing counseling." I agreed instantly. "We'll do whatever it takes." When she left, the three of us sat together in silence. The house felt lighter, cleansed of an invisible shadow. "Grandma," Emily whispered, "are you sad about what happened to my parents?" The question weighed heavy, but I owed her honesty. "I'm sad for the son I thought I had. Sad that Charles chose a path that destroyed our family. But I'm not sad now that we're safe." Emily lowered her head. "I ruined the family when I told their secret." My heart ached. She was blaming herself. I lifted her chin. "No, sweetheart, you didn't ruin anything. You saved us all. You were the only one brave enough. But now my parents are going to prison. They're going because of their choices, because they hurt their own family for money." "That's not your fault," George added. "Sometimes adults make terrible mistakes, and they have to pay the price. But you did the right thing." That night, as Emily slept in the guest room we had turned into her own, George and I sat together talking. "Margaret," he said quietly, "when Charles claimed you were losing your mind, there was a moment I doubted." "I know," I admitted, squeezing his hand. "Their plan was to make even you doubt me. I hated that. Don't hate yourself. They were cunning. But in the end, I believed you. You know why I had to gather evidence? Because no one would believe just my word. A woman accusing her own son of poisoning her, it would sound like delusions of old age." George nodded sadly. "So what now?" "Now we rebuild. We heal. And we teach Emily that doing the right thing matters, no matter how hard it is. And Charles? He made his choice, and now he must face the consequences. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in months. For the first time, I no longer feared tomorrow. Justice had come. More importantly, the real family, the ones who truly loved me, were safe. 6 months later, I sat in the garden, watching Emily play with the little puppy George had given her for her 9th birthday. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the flower beds we had planted together in the spring. For the first time in so long, I felt truly at peace. The trial had ended 3 weeks earlier. Charles was sentenced to 2 years in prison for poisoning and conspiracy to commit fraud. Vanessa received 18 months for her role. Doctor Mason lost his medical license and was fined $100,000 for medical fraud. That's not nearly enough, Carlos Ramsey, the local reporter, had said after hearing the verdict. I told him, what matters isn't how long the sentence is, but that they can't hurt anyone else again. Emily had stayed with us through it all. Rosa Johnson's evaluation was strict but fair, and in the end, she ruled that George and I were the best place for her. Temporary custody became permanent last month. "Grandma!" Emily called from the yard. "Look what Cinnamon can do!" The tiny golden puppy had learned to give his paw, and Emily's face lit up with joy. These past months had transformed her from a frightened, guilt-ridden child into a girl bursting with life and confidence. "Wonderful, sweetheart," I called back. "Come inside. Let's get dinner ready." George came home soon after. At 70, he had taken a part-time job at the hardware store in town, saying it was to keep busy, though I knew it was to make sure we had more income to care for Emily. "How was school today?" he asked, washing his hands at the sink. Emily beamed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like our family was whole again. "Grandma, I got a 10 in math," Emily announced proudly. "And the teacher said my essay about heroes was the best in the class." "Who did you write about?" I asked, though I already knew. "About you, Grandma. I wrote that you're the bravest person I've ever known." My heart overflowed with emotion. This extraordinary child had turned the deepest betrayal of my life into something beautiful. Over dinner, Emily told us about her friends at school, the play they were preparing, and a science project she wanted to do on medicinal plants. Her life was full again, full of the simple, wonderful things every 9-year-old deserves. "Grandma," she asked as we washed the dishes together, "do you miss Dad Charles?" It was a question she asked from time to time, and I always gave her the most honest answer I could. "I miss Charles when he was your age," I said softly. "I miss the boy who used to play in this garden, who helped me cook in this kitchen. But that Charles has been gone for a very long time. Do you think he'll ever change?" "I don't know, sweetheart. People can change, but only if they really want to, and only if they're willing to face the consequences." Charles had written me 3 letters from prison. I tore each one without opening it. I wasn't ready for apologies or excuses. Maybe one day, but not now. Vanessa had also tried every way to reach out through lawyers, asking to visit Emily, but the court denied her each time. A woman who had been willing to drug an old woman to steal her house was not someone fit to be near a child. That night, after Emily was asleep, George and I sat on the porch with cups of tea, as we had for decades. "Do you ever regret fighting back?" he asked. "Never," I answered without hesitation. "If I hadn't, I'd probably be locked away in a nursing home right now, drugged into confusion while they lived in our house." Emily would be growing up with parents who taught her that hurting your own family for money is acceptable. You were so brave, Margaret. No, I shook my head. I was terrified. But sometimes doing the right thing isn't about not being afraid. It's about acting even while you're trembling. George took my hand, the same hand he had held for 45 years, since our wedding day. What do you think the future holds? I looked toward Emily's window, where a nightlight cast gentle shapes across her pink curtains. I think we'll see an extraordinary little girl grow up. We'll teach her that family isn't just blood, but those who love you unconditionally. We'll teach her that doing the right thing is never easy, but always worth it. And we'll grow old in this house, surrounded by real love. We'll see Emily graduate, go to college, maybe even get married one day. We'll be the grandparents she deserves. That sounds perfect. It won't be perfect, I admitted. There will be challenges. Raising a child at our age won't be easy. There will be moments when she misses her parents, when she asks questions I won't know how to answer. But it will be real love, real life. That night, before bed, I wrote in my journal, "Today marks 6 months since I discovered my son was willing to destroy my mind to steal my house. 6 months since I realized family doesn't always mean blood, and that true love sometimes demands painful choices. My granddaughter Emily taught me that courage doesn't come from age or size, but from the heart. She taught me that doing the right thing matters more than keeping a false peace. She taught me that sometimes saving someone means risking everything. Charles made his choice. He chose money over love, greed over family, betrayal over honesty. Now he must face the consequences. I made my choice too. I chose to fight for my dignity, for my home, for my future. I chose to protect an innocent child who had the courage to protect me first, and I regret nothing. Tomorrow, I will wake in my own bed, in my own house, with a clear mind and a peaceful heart. I will have breakfast with George and Emily, help with her homework, work in the garden. I will live a simple but honest life, surrounded by true love. At 68, I have learned it's never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to demand respect, never too late to choose dignity over comfort. And most of all, it's never too late to begin again. I closed my journal and looked up at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds. George's steady breathing beside me, Emily shifting gently in her room, the old clock marking time. These were the sounds of a real family, a home built on love and respect. Perhaps the most painful thing in life isn't losing a house, but realizing that a child you raised chose betrayal over love. But in that moment, I also understood that true family isn't always blood. It's the ones who stay, who protect you, who love you without conditions. I've learned that courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. Courage means standing up, doing what's right, even when your heart is trembling. And love, sometimes, is the greatest strength of all, the thing that carries us through pain and helps us rebuild a home from the ashes. My story ends in peace, but I know out there many are still struggling with family trials, with impossible choices between forgiveness and protecting themselves. If it were you, what would you do when faced with betrayal by those closest to you? I would love to hear your thoughts, because every experience carries its own wisdom. Share them in the comments, so we can find strength together in each other's stories. And if you'd like to walk with me on the journeys ahead, stay close. There will be more stories where together we learn, we love, and we rediscover the true meaning of family.